What's up, guys? Swift here with a draft position update and a quick surprise mock draft at the end. More than one reason to root for the Texans to win games. When Lovie Smith was a coach of the Chicago Bears, one thing about his teams were that they never quit. In 2007, entering the final two games of the season, the Bears were 5-9 and eliminated from the playoffs. Lovie's team came out and won both of the final games, finishing 7-9. 2009, another very similar situation. The Bears were 5-9, eliminated from the playoffs, and played the Vikings and Lions over the final 2 weeks of the season. Lovie again clawed his way to final victories and a 7-9 record. If Lovie can get this Texans squad to squeeze out one or two more wins, it'll open up a lot of potential opportunities for the Bears in the upcoming NFL draft. Not only will it open the opportunity for the Bears to land the number one overall pick, but it also gives us another potential team to trade down with. See, the Texans can afford to win games and still trade up if they want a quarterback. They have a ton of extra draft capital from the Deshaun Watson trade. They have 2 first-round picks and 6 picks in the first 110 selections, not to mention extra picks in future years. Bottom line, root for the Texans to win both of their upcoming matchups. Both are winnable games. They play the Jaguars this Sunday, who they already beat earlier this season in Week 5. Then they finish the season against the Colts, who they tied earlier in the year. Go Texans. So I mentioned the possibility of the number one pick, but I think this team has the potential to beat the Lions this weekend. It would be really awesome to knock the Lions out of the playoffs while still keeping a top 4 pick in the draft. For people rooting for the number 1 or number 2 pick, it's simple. The Bears need to lose both games. If that happens and the Texans win at least one, the Bears will then pick number 1 overall. If the Texans don't win at least one game, the Bears would still hold on to the number 2 pick by losing the next 2 games. But if we beat the Lions this weekend, we only fall to the 4th pick overall. And if the Broncos or Cardinals can get a win, we could get back up to 3 or even still keep the 2nd pick if both the Cardinals and Broncos win. So even for fans that don't care about winning now, it doesn't hurt much to beat the Lions this weekend. Either way, I expect a ton of fireworks on offense from both teams. Same for the Vikings game. The Vikings will have something to play for, most likely. Root for the 49ers to win this weekend so that they can stay on the Vikings' heels for that number 2 seed. Other than the Texans, there are only 5 other teams we care about going forward when it comes to draft position. The Ravens have clinched a playoff berth now, so our best hope is that they lose in the first round, which would put our 2nd round pick somewhere in the early 20s. Once again, if we lose both games, the only other team that matters is the Texans. We only worry about the Broncos and Cardinals if we win one more game. One more win causes us to fall behind those 2 teams in draft order, so we want the Broncos and Cardinals to get another win. Both teams are struggling, so it might be tough. The Broncos finished the season against 2 playoff teams, the Chiefs and the Chargers, and the Cardinals finish off with the Falcons and 49ers. If we lose one more game, then we don't have to worry about the Colts, Falcons, or Rams. I do want the Rams to win another game at least to drop the Lions pick further down. They just had a dominating victory over the Broncos, and they finished the season versus the Chargers and the Seahawks. The bottom line is that things will get a lot more clear after this weekend, and then we'll finalize next week after we play the Vikings. So we are getting very close to knowing where we will pick, and then things will get interesting. Simply put though, root for the Texans, Broncos, and Cardinals this weekend. Now I want to hit you guys with a quick mock draft. This is going to be through our first 4 rounds. I wanted to touch on a couple of guys that I think could come in and fix this team. There are a ton of different ways I could go for this. This was just a fun one that I did, and I just wanted to throw it up on the board. I may be doing some mock draft scenarios later in this week. I definitely will once the season is over. Coming in with a first round pick, at number 2 overall, I have the Bears taking defensive end Will Anderson Jr. from Alabama. I imagine this will be a conversation leading all the way up to the draft, whether it's Bears fans or just NFL draft talk. Will Anderson Jr. versus Jalen Carter. I'm going with Will Anderson here because I believe Ryan Poles can find a penetrating 3-tech in free agency or later in the draft. And Will Anderson might be the best pass rusher since Micah Parsons. This team needs to rebuild the defensive line, and getting an elite edge rusher might be the harder find of the two. I still have tons of tape to watch on both prospects, so this is far from a final take, just a fun mock. In the second round, I have the Bears going with John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota. Shoring up the center position is a huge priority this season. I haven't finished my evaluations yet, but landing a long-term center option would go a long way to help fixing this offensive line. And then in the third round, I follow up with another pick on the offensive line. Offensive tackle Darnell Wright from Tennessee. If a guy like Darnell Wright is available in the third round, Poles may have to go right back to the well. This would make back-to-back picks that would add 2 guys capable of starting day 1 on our offensive line. And then in round 4, I would go back to the defensive line. Clemson defensive tackle Tyler Davis was a highly recruited prospect out of high school. He looked like a future star his freshman season. He was slowed down by injuries, but he's a guy who has star potential and could be a steal in the 4th round. He would also help out our interior on the defensive line. Then in round 4, I would go for a wide receiver. My pick here would be Wake Forest wide receiver A.T. Perry. It's too early for me to speculate too much, but I do like the depth in this receiver class. At this point in the draft, if A.T. Perry was there, I would grab him up. However, there are other guys who could be available in that range. Dontavian Wicks, Raheem Jarrett, Xavier Hutchinson, or Parker Washington, just to name a few. Another option, if we grabbed Will Anderson in the first round, is if defensive tackle Mazi Smith from Michigan is there in the second round, he would be almost an instant selection for me. He was number 1 on Bruce Feldman's freak list. He is an athletic monster. If we could somehow start the draft off with Will Anderson Jr. and Mazi Smith, getting our defensive end and our defensive tackle, and then could come back and shore up center or offensive tackle, a wide receiver in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds, that would be my dream scenario. Thanks for watching, guys. That was just a brief mock draft. I'm going to go so much deeper when we get to the off season. We're just 2 weeks away. As far as who to root for this weekend, root for the Texans, the Broncos, and Cardinals, and then the Colts, Falcons, and Rams if you want to get more hypothetical. Stay tuned, guys. I have so much more coming. Hit that like button for me, and until next time, bear down.